Hi everybody, Olive again, and here to do another Tuesday Talks. I will put the link to the Goodreads group for this down below, and if you've forgotten, this is a feature where every Tuesday there is a topic of discussion regarding books, and booktubers are free to post their answers on their booktube channel, so that's what I'm going to do. Today's topic is, are audiobooks reading? And this is one that I am particularly interested in because I love audiobooks and have a lot to say about them, so here we go. My answer to this question is, of course, yes, 1,000 times yes. I absolutely adore audiobooks. My job is very audiobook friendly. I do some monotonous work for my job, and having a book in my ears is something that I absolutely love doing. It fills up time that I would otherwise just be in my head, so it provides a really good escape for me, and I get to be listening to a story. It's like story time for adults. Before I go any farther, I should say that I totally understand the counter argument. I see why people would say that audiobooks are not reading, because of course you're not holding a book, you don't have the words in front of you, you're not reading along, whether it's aloud or to yourself. I see why some people would not consider that traditional reading. And it's not really traditional reading. But what I would say kind of in return is, would you consider, when you were a small child, an adult reading to you, you were still listening to the story, you were still interacting. It's a little bit different, of course, because you could stop your parents or ask them to explain something to you, so it's a little bit different in that you don't have that interactivity with the narrator, but to me it's the same thing. I do see how some people could see it as more of a passive activity. You can of course get distracted or not be following along, particularly in fiction. I know some people have a problem with that they kind of forget what's going on in the story and then feel that they have to be going back a lot. To me, that just takes some getting used to. Lastly, and something that I think actually makes a pretty good argument, is that because you're not the one reading it and it's not your internal voice, it's someone else reading it and interpreting the words a certain way, you have less control over the interpretation of the book. So if you're reading something and you're picturing a character to be saying something a certain way or with a certain tone, but the narrator has a whole other take on that, then that's kind of changing the way that you're hearing the story, if you know what I mean. However, the first point that I'll bring up kind of counters this. Sometimes classics can be a little bit intimidating to people because the language is different than the language we use today. Sometimes it might be a little bit more lofty, or the vocabulary might be intimidating. Reading audiobook versions of the classics for me helped me get more into the classics. The first audiobook that I listened to of the classics was Jane Eyre. For the first 10 to 20 minutes of it, I didn't really understand what was going on, and I was just kind of getting used to the language. By the end of the first hour, I was totally into it. I can't say whether or not, if I would have just picked up the novel by itself, if I would have continued with it, because I did find the language intimidating. I'm not going to lie about it. But Jane Eyre has become one of my favorite books because I got used to the language, and then I went through and actually read some of the pages, and because I was used to hearing that in my head, and I was used to the rhythm and kind of tone of the language that Charlotte Bronte used, I was fine with it. Again, I love audiobooks because you can be listening to a story and consuming a story while you're doing things that are somewhat monotonous. Say it's housework or laundry or your commute or cooking. I really love to listen to audiobooks while I'm cooking. It's keeping your brain busy while you're doing a monotonous activity. It's making those more monotonous activities more fun, in my opinion. I don't find it difficult to focus. I have a lot of experience now listening to fiction on audiobook. I know people sometimes find nonfiction more accessible. I like them both on audiobook. If I lose focus, which I do, of course I do, I can just go back, between 15 seconds to even a minute and a half and get right back to where I was. But for me, consuming a story is consuming a story. It doesn't really matter the format. I remember the story just as well. I get into it just as well, if not more. I get the meanings just as well. It is just the same for me as if I were to have the book in front of me. But of course, the answer to this question is going to completely depend on the person. Like I've said, I completely understand the counter arguments. I would get why people say it's not reading. I personally count audiobooks as books towards my Goodreads reading goal, but I get why people would not want to have those count towards your reading goal. It's like anything else. If you don't agree with it, then just don't do it. People's reading lives are incredibly personal and entirely your own business. I don't think anybody else's opinion should interfere in what you consider reading, and I don't think you should feel guilty about putting those towards your reading goal if you agree that's reading. Audiobooks have opened up a whole new world of reading for me. They have introduced a way for me to be consuming a story when I'm doing something somewhat boring. Overall, they have introduced a new format of what I consider reading into my life, and I absolutely love them. I can't get enough. I would love to hear your opinions about whether or not you consider audiobooks reading. I'm looking forward to watching other videos that discuss this topic. If you have any comments about the points or counter arguments that I have talked about in this video today, please drop a comment down below. You can also find me on both Twitter and Instagram at @bookolive, and the link to my Goodreads profile is down below as well if you'd like to be friends or see what I'm reading. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.